Hello and welcome to this exploring session looking at some Lord Mayor's shows from 1624 and 1626. But what happened to 1625, I hear you ask? Well, you'll find out later. It's quite cheerful. We are looking, if you've not looked at any of our Lord Mayor shows videos before, we are looking at these events usually staged on the 29th of October, unless that happens to be a Sunday. And they are a series of pageants, carts, chariots, mythological creatures, demonstrated to the people, though primarily to the Lord Mayor himself, as he goes in to get sworn in on the day. He starts off at the Guildhall, makes his way down to the river. Something may happen on the way to the river. On the river, there's all sorts of boat stuff going on. It's all very glorious. Lots of trumpeting, lots of bangs and noises. Floats off to Westminster, gets sworn in, comes back, alights a little to the south of St. Paul's, wanders up to St. Paul's. Stuff may be happening all along there. And then the primary pageants are happening along Cheapside on the way to the Guildhall again. Then they all have a slap-up meal, head back to St. Paul's for some prayers, and then the Lord Mayor is semi-escorted home as well. There is a little map I'll be throwing up on my screen later on to help illustrate that as we go. But without further ado, I will go around the room. We will introduce ourselves in a hopefully moderately fulsome way rather than just effectively repeating what I say back at me. So joining us today, Greg, do introduce yourself, please.
Hello, I'm Greg. I'm feeling more like 1625 than 2426 today.
Yes, and that will be explained as a comment slightly later on in this video. Liza, do introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Liza. Feeling kind of a 1595 vibe, old school, in London.
And joining us, Rachael, introduce yourself, please.
Hi, I'm Rachael. I'm not sure what year vibe I'm on. Maybe 16 something vibe.
Right, you've got a good 100 to choose from, so there's plenty going on there. Lynsey, do introduce yourself, please.
Hi, I'm Lynsey, and I think it's not so much the year vibe that I have, is the day in October vibe, and I'm definitely feeling more 31st than 29th.
Excellent. And Alex, do introduce yourself, please.
Hi, I'm Alex, and I am down with whatever year has the beautiful ladies and the men in Miniver.
And you'll have to go back to 1585 to understand that reference. And finally, joining us to help keep us on track as to what's going on, Tracey, introduce yourself, please. Muted at present.
Hi, I'm Tracey. I wish I was in the 17th century, and I wish I was in London. Stop, take my book down, please. Yes, it's Middleton's last show tonight, so it's a bit of a moment, and there may be tears.
There may. We shall see. So we have, yes, two playwrights, two titans. But before we get to Middleton, we're going to be starting off with some John Webster, new to this parish within civic pageantry. We've not had a Webster before. I will ask Liza if you could read the opening page bump and also the opening dedicatory passage. If you could be John Webster as well, please. Let us hear how this document opens.
Monuments of Honour. Derived from remarkable antiquity and celebrated in the honourable city of London, at the sole munificent charge and expenses of the right worthy and worshipful fraternity of the eminent merchant tailors. Directed in their most affectionate love at the confirmation of their right worthy brother John Gore, in the high office of his Majesty's lieutenant over this his royal chamber. Expressing in a magnificent triumph all the pageants, chariots of glory, temples of honour, besides a spacious and goodly sea triumph, as well particularly to the honour of this city, as generally to the glory of this our kingdom. Invented and written by John Webster, merchant tailor, non norunt haec monumenta mori. Printed at London by Nicholas Oakes, 1624. To the right worthy deserver of this so noble a ceremony this day conferred upon him, John Gore, Lord Mayor and Chancellor of the renowned city of London. My worthy lord, these presentments, which were intended principally for your honour, and for illustrating the worth of that worthy corporation whereof you are a member, come now humbly to kiss your lordship's hands, and to present the inventor of them to that service which my ability expressed in this may call me to under your lordship's favour, to you, do you honour, and the city service in the quality of a scholar, assuring your lordship I shall never either to your ear or table press unmannerly or impertinently. My endeavours this way have received grace and allowance from your worthy brothers that were supervisors of the cost of these triumphs, and my hope is that they shall stand no less respected in your eye, nor undervalued in your worthy judgment, which favours done to one born free of your company and your servant shall ever be acknowledged by him, stands interested, to your lordship in all duty. John Webster.
And that was indeed John Webster. So we are in the company of the Merchant Tailors and John Gore. What do we know about John Gore? What do we know about the Merchant Tailors? Tracey, can you give us some background?
John Gore is not particularly notable, really, except that he was married to the daughter of one of the daughters of the Lord Mayor of 1609, whose partial show we looked at a few weeks ago. It just shows you how interconnected these big city families were, really. The Merchant Tailors don't have that many Lord Mayors in this period, really. The last one was 1612, so some 12 years previously. And of course, as it's already been made clear, John Webster himself was a member of the Merchant Tailors Company by patrimony. In other words, his father had been a member and he had inherited his membership. And he kind of really underscores that as you go through the text, actually.
Lovely. Yes, we have. I quite like the idea that he's in this dedication. He's he won't press unmannerly or impertinently. It's just sort of an interesting. I quite like that. Any first thoughts on that before we go into the initial bump? Before we get to some dialogue, we're going to get some dialogue quite quickly. Lynsey.
Yeah, just following on from what you just said, Robert, that pressing unmannerly or impertinently either your ear or your table. So I'm not going to ask any favours, presumably, and I'm not going to constantly be coming round for a tasty meal. Is there anything else that might be included in that phrase? I was very struck by that.
Is that a reference to the sense that the Lord Mayor is semi-expected to be to hold open house, and that Webster is being polite and saying I won't constantly come round for dinner, just because I'm we're of the same cloth, as it were. So we've got promises of pageants, chariots of glory, temples of honour, besides a specious and goodly sea triumph. I don't know if we're going to get details of the sea triumph. We will find out in a moment. What we'll do is we'll read the first little chunk-et. I'll ask Greg to read the first big chunky paragraph, Lynsey to read the next chunky paragraph, Rachel, if you could be Thetis, and Alex, could you be Oceanus? And then we'll pause and see where we are.
I could, in this, my preface, by as great light of learning as any formerly employed in this service can attain, to deliver to you the original and cause of all triumphs, their excessive cost in the time of the Romans. I can likewise, with so noble amplification, make a survey of the worth and glory of the triumphs of the precedent times in this honourable city of London, that were my work of a bigger bulk, they should remain to all posterity. But both my pen and ability this way are confined in too narrow a circle, nor have I space enough in this so short a volume to express only with rough lines and a faint shadow, as the painter's phrase is, first the great care and alacrity of the right worshipful, the master and wardens, and the rest of the selected and industrious committees, both for the curious and judging election of the subject, for the present spectacles, and next that the working or mechanic part of it might be answerable to the invention. Leaving therefore these worthy gentlemen to the embraces and thanks of the right honourable and worthy praetor, and myself under the shadow of their crest, which is a safe one, 'tis the holy lamb in the sunbeams. I do present to all modest and indifferent judges these my present endeavours.
I fashioned for the more amplifying the show upon the water 2 eminent spectacles in manner of a sea triumph. The first furnished with 4 persons, in the front Oceanus and Thetis, behind them Thamesis and Medway, the 2 rivers on whom the Lord Mayor extends his power, as far as from Staines to Rochester. The other show is of a fair terrestrial globe circled about in convenient seats with 7 of our most famous navigators, as Sir Francis Drake, Sir John Hawkins, Sir Martin Frobisher, Sir Humphrey Gilbert, Captain Thomas Cavendish, Captain Christopher Carlyle, and Captain John Davis. The conceit of this device to be that in regard the 2 rivers pay due tribute to waters to the seas, Oceanus, in grateful recompense, returns the memory of these 7 worthy captains who have made England so famous in remotest parts of the world. These 2 spectacles at my Lord Mayor's taking water at the 3 Cranes, approaching my Lord's barge, after a peal of sea thunder from the other side of the water, these speeches between Oceanus and Thetis follow.
What brave sea music bids us welcome, hark! Sure this is Venice, in the day St. Mark, in which the Duke and Senators their course hold, to wed our empire with a ring of gold.
No, Thetis, you are mistaken. We are led with infinite delight from the land's head. In ken of goodly shipping and yon bridge, Venice had near the like survey that ridge of stately buildings which the river hem, and grace the silver stream as the stream them. That beauteous seat is London, so much famed, where any navigable sea is named. And in that bottom eminent merchants placed, as rich and venturous as ever graced Venice or Europe, these 2 rivers here, our followers may tell you where we are. This Thamesis, that midway who are sent to you, most worthy praetor, to present acknowledgement of duty, near shall err, from Staines unto the ancient Rochester. And now, to grace their triumph in respect, these pay us tribute. We are pleased to select 7 worthy navigators out by name, seated beneath this globe, whose ample fame in the remotest part of the earth is found, and some of them have circled the globe round. These, you observe, are living in your eye, and so they ought, for worthy men ne'er die. Drake, Hawkins, Frobisher, Gilbert, brave knights that brought home gold and honour from sea fights, Cavendish, Carlyle, and Davis, and to these so many worthies I could add at seas. Of this bold nation it would envy strike in the rest of the world, who cannot show the like. 'Tis action values honour, as the flint looks black and feels like ice, yet from within it there are struck sparks, which to the darkest nights yield quick and piercing food for several lights.
You have quickened well my memory, and now of this your grateful triumph I allow. Honor looks clear and spreads her beams at large, from the grave senate seated in that barge. Rich lading swell your bottoms, a blessed gale, follow your ventures that never fail, and may you live successfully to wear the joy of this day, each man his whole year.
And this show, having tendered this service to my lord upon the water, is after to be conveyed ashore, and in convenient place employed for adorning the rest of the triumph. So, this opening bit, we've gone from the Guildhall, we've headed down to Three Cranes, and we have this spectacle on the barges. We have two of them, by my reading, one of which is primarily just to be looked at, which is a globe. I wonder whether this is terrestrial globe is semi-reused from a previous large globular device that we've had in previous years. I wonder if this frame has been reused, surrounded by people having convenient seats. I like convenient seats. And then once he's got in place, ready to go, the cue from the other side of the water is a peal of sea thunder. Presumably they set off a load of cannon. And then we get some speeches. Thoughts from the room about this particular spectacle that we're getting here. Who wants to leap in? Alex.
It's sort of a technical question, which is going to display my ignorance of these sorts of things. Presumably the lungs on these players to deliver those speeches of Oceanus and Tethys must have been fairly impressive, because I mean, I know that we're talking about a period where there's no real sound amplification, although I suppose if you're in a building that helps amplify it. But to be stood on a barge in the middle of the Thames, presumably with all the other sounds around, presumably you we're really going to have to project this stuff.
Yes.
Yes. I mean,
but especially given a number of the actors are going to be children.
Right. Yeah. Wow.
The Lord Mayor himself is also on the water at this point. The Lord Mayor and their entourage.
The odds on, if anyone's hearing this, the only person who's able to hear it will be the Lord Mayor, because he will be the one it's for.
Sound does carry over water surprisingly well, though.
This feels like something for some. Has anyone done any attempts to test how well barge shouting works?
Can we do that? It would be socially distanced.
Yeah, I see no reason why not.
Good. Yeah, definitely.
Rachel, did I see a hand?
No, I was just gonna say maybe this. What Alex said. I don't know how people would hear this. So, is it just a few people who are supposed to hear this? Is this some sort of like pre thing? Like when you graduate college or high school, and they have the people standing there, and it's somebody just giving a speech for maybe just him and a few other people in the society.
Thoughts from the room on that? It seems, ultimately the Lord Mayor is there. It's for the Lord Mayor. I don't know at this part how many people are able to be relatively close to this part of the, because there's a massive procession following the Lord Mayor as well. There's a lot of people about who are part of it, rather than the pageants later on, which are big spectacles in a space where there's enough room for manoeuvre for more spectators. So I don't know what the logistics there as to how many people could get close to it. Do we know what the riverfront would look like at that point in terms of spacing?
Funnily enough, I'm just looking at Layers of London, and actually Three Cranes is quite spacious. I mean, it was called Three Cranes because of the three large cranes that were lifting goods from the boats to the warehouses, and it looks like there's quite a big area actually. So yeah, maybe. I mean, people would have probably followed the procession down to an extent.
Okay, we're going to move a little further on. I'm going to finish the paragraph that we're currently in the middle of, because that sort of makes sense. I'll ask Alex if you could be the next chunk of prose, Lynsey to be the next chunk of prose, and then Liza, if you could be Troynovant, please. Greg, who is currently invisible, but his voice hopefully will carry. having some video transmission issues. Hopefully it's all going to be fine. If you could be Sir Philip Sidney, please. A part you're born to play, I'm sure. And then we'll probably pause at around that point. So we've just finished the sequence on the barges at Three Cranes. They've all toddled off to Westminster. And done the swearing in, and now returning to St Paul's on the river, and which is described in the next bit of text that I will read. Returning to the text. After my Lord Mayor's landing and coming past Paul's Chain, there first attends for his honour in Paul's churchyard a beautiful spectacle called the Temple of Honour, the pillars of which are bound about with roses and other beautiful flowers, which shoot up to the adorning of the King's Majesty's arms on the top of the temple.
In the highest seat, a person representing Troyes-Nouvant, or the city, enthroned in rich habiliments. Beneath her, as admiring her peace and felicity, sit 5 eminent cities, as Antwerp, Paris, Rome, Venice, and Constantinople. Under these sit 5 famous scholars and poets of this our kingdom, as Sir Geoffrey Chaucer, the learned Gower, the excellent John Lydgate, the sharp-witted Sir Thomas More, and last, as worthy both soldier and scholar, Sir Philip Sidney, these being celebrators of honour and the perseverers both of the names of men and memories of cities above to posterity.
I present riding afore this temple Henry de Royal, the first pilgrim or gatherer of quarterage for this company, and John of Yakesley, King Edward III's pavilion maker, who purchased our hall in the 6th year of the aforesaid king's government. These lived in Edward I's time likewise, in the 6th of whose reign this company was confirmed a guild or corporation by the name of tailors and linen armourers, with power to choose a master and wardens at midsummer. These are decently habited and hooded according to the ancient manner. My lord is here saluted with 2 speeches, first by Troyes-Nouvant in these lines following.
History, truth, and virtue seek by name to celebrate the merchant tailor's fame. That Henry de Royal, this we call, worthy John Yakesley purchased first their hall. And thus from low beginnings there oft springs societies claim brotherhoods of kings. I, Troyes-Nouvant, placed eminent in the eye of these, admire at my felicity 5 cities, Antwerp and the spacious Paris, Rome, Venice, and the Turks' metropolis. Beneath these 5 learned poets, worthy men, who do eternize brave acts by their pen, Chaucer, Gower, Lydgate, More, and for our time, Sir Philip Sidney, glory of our clime. These beyond death a fame to monarchs give, and these make cities and societies live.
Next speech, delivered by him, represents Sir Philip Sidney. To honour by our writings worthy men flows as a duty from a judging pen. And when we are employed in such sweet praise, bees swarm and leave their honey on our bays. Evermore musically verses run, when the loathed vein of flattery they shun. Survey, most noble praetor, what succeeds, virtue low-bred, aspiring to high deeds.
Rachel, could I ask you to read the next 2 paragraphs, please? And then Alex, could you read Sir John Hawksmoor?
These passing on in the next place, my lord is in contrad with the person of S. John Hawkwood in complete armour, his plume and feather for his horses, chiffon of the company's colours, white and watchet. This worthy knight did most worthy service in the time of Edward III in France, after served as general. Diverse princes of Italy went to the Holy Land, and in his return back died at Florence, and there lies buried with a fair monument over him. This worthy gentleman was free of our company, and thus I prepare him to give my lord entertainment.
My birth was mean, yet my deservings grew to eminence, and in France a high pitch flew. From a poor common soldier I attained the style of captain, and then knighthood gained. Served the Black Prince in France in all his wars, then went to the Holy Land, thence brought my scars, and wearied body which no danger feared, to Florence, where it nobly lies interred. There Sir John Hawkwood's memory doth live, and to the merchant tailors fame doth give.
And there we'll pause. Apologies if earlier. I said Hawksmoor earlier, didn't I? Rather than Hawkswood. I apologise. Completely out of place. We have effectively our first unit of action. We have this Temple of Honour. We've got Troynovant, the city enthroned, other cities underneath, various poets underneath. We've got riding before this temple, other figures. There's this first thing doing various things. How are we finding these relatively short but punchy speeches? Do we think there's other speeches that just aren't recorded here, or do we think that's it for the speechifying? I just wonder. You've got a lot of poets available. Is it they just went round and said, no, you'll speak for all the poets, Sydney?
I don't know. I mean, these things were often compiled at kind of short notice. So maybe there either wasn't time to write a speech for each poet, or they told him to cut for length.
Yeah.
I think that's entirely feasible, given that Webster had a reputation for being very slow writer and not given to economy, shall we say. It's entirely possible, I think.
They are really punchy. We've got lots of courses, but they're not very big.
You really wouldn't know he hadn't done it before. Actually, it's comes across, I think, very well. It's quite long. There's quite a lot going on in this one, and he seems to have made a good job of it.
Well, what I quite liked about the sort of opening bump as well is when he does seem to be doing various credits, where credits due at the top of the document as well, whereas some others you sort of get some credits at the very end. But and not just that, also seems to be to the process of getting this on. The committee's been very helpful. It's all been a very smooth process. That's what.
And I love the way he says our hall and our company.
Made it very easy. Rachel.
No, just a question for Tracey, because you Rob sent that chapter of your book, and I was reading it, and they say free of the company a lot. What does that mean? Does free just mean a member?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, get your freedom, because it enables you to be able to do things like trade and vote and stuff. So, yeah.
So, Temple of Honour, what really is it about? We've had these pageants before that are really, making quite bold statements about what trade is going on and things here. We've obviously got the representation of the city and other cities, and various important figures associated with the livery company. Is there more going on here, we think, or is it actually relatively straightforward? Alex?
There were just two things that struck me, and they're probably quite sort of banal things to say to anyone who knows this sort of stuff, which I don't. First of all, is the whole sort of like contextualizing of London within Europe, sort of simultaneously kind of like, haha, we're better than you, but also kind of the whole thing about Hawkswood being buried abroad, that transports his fame there, that actually London is this nexus in the middle of all these places. It's not quite as sort of out and out empire led as I guess it would later kind of be when you sort of hit much later time periods. But also it's sort of, I find it interesting from the point of view of sort of modern practice, where we have all these these designated roles of kind of designer or what have you, and you know, in modern scripts you'll kind of have a suggestion saying, you know, they go to the cafe or they go to the rose garden or what have you, and then it's kind of then left to a designer and a production designer. And it's interesting kind of reading these blurbs about sort of the way the Temple of Honor is going to look, and who would I don't know who would have realized that, because obviously within this period there's not sort of professional design role, and I'm guessing the merchant tailors probably would have had access to decent costumes and stuff.
Well, no, actually there were professional designers.
Okay.
Webster doesn't mention anyone by name, which is unusual, but you'll see when we get on to Middleton's 1626 show that he gives Gerard Christmas, who was the kind of the great carver of his day, a really sort of strong plug.
Right.
So yes, they worked in kind of teams, and the kind of the practical side of it, how to realise the ideas and devices was usually given over to a painter, stainer, or a carpenter, or somebody who could do those kinds of works. Because
it's interesting to me, sort of only knowing about early playhouses, that really, you know, the one thing, the trite thing you're always taught about those is it was a bare stage convention. There really wasn't much other than the design of the building, that there wasn't a great deal of anything. Whereas here there obviously is.
It's an amazing stage. I mean, writers must have been, if they were used to those kinds of constraints, they must have been just like, wow, we could do this incredible stuff.
It's like an art installation. It's kind of like we have the Enchanted Forest up here, where they take a forest and like put in all these audiovisual son et lumiere things, and I kind of imagine it being like the Renaissance equivalent.
It's more like the court mask than it is the sort of what we think of as the professional stage, and you know, in terms of the way that these things are presented and the kind of allegorical qualities and all the rest of it. Yeah, it's more like the mask, really.
Yeah, that's a really good comparison, because it seems to me, again, you're the authority here, but it seems to me that the dialogue is meant, the dialogue doesn't drive it. The dialogue is meant to adorn the spectacle, and the spectacle is meant to adorn the ritual. So I think it's really interesting what writers and what people they seek to memorialize. Sir John Hawkwood was a mercenary with a reputation for some brutality. He spent more, they say, oh, he went to the Holy Land, but he spent a lot more time fighting Christians than he did. I mean, he kicked the Pope's ass once or twice, and then the Pope hired him to kick other people's ass on behalf of the Pope, so, I mean, who knows? But the writers are a really interesting choice. You've got Chaucer and Gower, who are pretty well remembered at this point. You've got John Lydgate, who now really only specialists care about him, but he did play a big part, I think, in cementing the legend of London as the modern Troy. And he wasn't the only person to do that, but he was incredibly prolific and wrote a whole lot. Then we get Sir Thomas More. I mean, are we memorializing Catholic saints in a London official procession now? Because dude got executed for not wanting to sign the act that legitimized the king's marriage to Anne Boleyn, right?
I think More is there as a Londoner, actually. He was a mercer and he served as sheriff, very, very highly regarded in the city. So I think he's there. Although he's a mercer, so they kind of borrowed him from the mercers. He's not a merchant tailor, unlike Hawkwood. You're right. I think Lydgate had a kind of London dimension to his works as well. I think so. Everything is filtered through that prism. The kings and queens later on that get mentioned are those that had a relationship with the merchant tailors, and that's the only reason why they get mentioned.
Yeah, and I'm really happy that they're giving Sidney his flowers. That as far as I can remember, Sidney isn't specifically a writer about London, but he was kind of the early Elizabethan rock star, and
especially after he died. His fame sort of has this weird exponential growth after his actual passing.
Live fast, die young, leave multiple volumes of poetry.
Exactly. So anyway, we will move on to the next element of this pageant. We're going to have a triumphant chariot in a moment, and we gather more data about where we're going. We're last geographical locator we had was we're at Paul's Churchyard. Whether we're working our way along Cheapside yet, or whether these are elements being presented here, I don't know yet. So maybe there's more data to come. Rachel, I'll ask you to read the next big chunk, then Lynsey to read the next chunk after that. I'll queue up Greg to be Edward III, and I'll close you out. Liza, the next big chunk after this pageant rides Queen Anne. And Alex, if you could do And in Regard Our Company, the last chunk there, and then we'll pause. And that hopefully should do all that. So, Rachel, let's find out what the triumphant chariot is going to be all about.
After him follows a triumphant chariot with the arms of the merchant tailors, colored and gilt in several places of it, and over it there is supported for a canopy a rich and very spacious pavilion, colored crimson, with a lion passant. This is drawn with 4 horses, for porters would have made it move tottering and improperly. In the chariot I place, for the honor of the company, of which records remain in the hall, 8 famous kings of this land that have been free of this worshipful company.
First, the victorious Edward III, that first courted the arms of France with England. Next, the munificent Richard II, that kept 10,000 daily in his court in Checkrell. By him, the grave and discreet Henry IV. In the next chairs, the scourge and terror of France, Henry V. And by him, his religious, though unfortunate son, Henry VI. The 2 next chairs are supplied with the persons of the amorous and personable Edward IV, for so Philip Comenius and Sir Thomas More describe him. The other with the bad man, but the good king, Richard III, for so the laws he made in his short government do illustrate him. But lastly, in the most eminent part of the chariot, I place the wise and politic Henry VII, holding the charter by which the company was improved from the title of linen armourers into the name of Master and Wardens of Merchant Tailors of St. John Baptist. The chairs of these kings, that were of the House of Lancaster, are garnished with artificial red roses, the rest with white, but the uniter of the division and houses, Henry VII, both with white and red, from whence his royal majesty, now reigning, took his motto. For one piece of his coin, Henricus Rosus Regna Jacobus.
And the speaker in this pageant is Edward III. The last line of his speech is repeated by all the rest in the chariot.
You went.
Oh, Greg, your sound just cut out. Edward III was so magnificent that you just went pop. You're still... we can see you. Speak and see if we can hear you.
Hello.
Yes, you're back. Excellent. Edward III. Let's start your charioting again. And he's
No, I'm here.
Oh, good. All right. Okay.
Few whence the merchant tailor's honour springs, from this most royal conventicle of kings. 8 that successively wore England's crown, held it a special honour and renown. The society was so worthy and so good, to unite them unto their brotherhood. Thus time and industry attain the prize, as seas from brooks, as brooks from hillocks rise. Let all good men this sentence oft repeat, by unity the smallest things grow great.
The kings all together say,
by unity
the smallest things grow great. And this repetition was proper, for it is the company's motto, Concordia Parveres Crescunt. And Liza.
After this pageant rides Queen Anne, wife to Richard II, free likewise of this company, nor let it seem strange, for besides her there were two duchesses, 5 countesses, and 2 baronesses free of this society, 17 princes and dukes, 1 archbishop, 31 earls, besides those made with noble Prince Henry, 1 viscount, 24 bishops, 66 barons, 7 abbots, 7 priors, or sub-priors, and with Prince Henry in the year 1607, the Duke of Lennox, the Earls of Nottingham, Suffolk, Arundel, Oxford, Worcester, Pembroke, Essex, Northampton, Salisbury, Montgomery, the Earl of Perth, Viscount Cranbourne, Barons, the Lord Evers, Hunsdon, Hayes, Borley, Mr. Howard, Mr. Sheffield, Sir John Harrington, Sir Thomas Challoner, besides states of the Low Countries, and Sir Noel Caroon, their Legier ambassador.
And in regard, our company is styled Brethren of the Fraternity of St. John Baptist, and that the ancient Knights of St. John of Jerusalem, to which now demolished house in St. John's Street our company then using to go to offer, it is recorded Henry VII, then accompanying them, gave our master the upper hand, because these knights, I say, were instituted to secure the way for pilgrims. In the desert, I present, therefore, 2 of the worthiest brothers of this Society of St. John Baptist I can find out in history. The first, Ahmad le Grand, by whose aid Rhodes was recovered from the Turks, and the order of Annuntide, or salutation, instituted with that of 4 letters F-E-R-T, signifying Fortitudo eius Rodum tenuit, and the other of Monsieur Jean Vallet, who defended Malta from the Turks' invasion and expelled them from that impregnable key of Christendom, thus styled Great Master of Malta, that Governor of Rhodes.
And there we will pause. So we have our Wars of the Roses float, sponsored by the Richard III Society. That moment, you know, he was a bad man, but the good king. He did some good laws, which is actually a fair comment. He did enact some good legislation. I like his artificial red roses, the rest with white. Nice little detail there. But 8 famous kings, the chariot with 8 seats. We've got a canopy, spacious pavilion. So when we're thinking of a chariot, it's more like a float, in the sense it's probably a longer thing than you're initially thinking. It's drawn by 4 horses, so it could be fairly chunky. Yeah. Thoughts on the room? Some people are rather enjoying Foot here. I'm seeing it in the chat. Yes, there's a certain amount of detailing here that I don't think is literal. I think it's more, this is, you know, I'm assuming that Queen Anne isn't riding along with viscounts and bishops and things, and that's not part of what's going on here, unless it actually is literal, but it didn't seem like it was.
I don't think so, but there might have been coats of arms as a kind of, you know, abbreviated way of doing that. I think I've probably seen the manuscript where Webster got this list of names from, actually, because when the King and Prince Henry, of whom more anon, visited the Merchant Thames in 1607, they presented with the scroll with the names of all the newly made aristocratic members of the society, who are these people here. So I would be very surprised if Webster hadn't just copied them from that particular document, which is still owned by the company. That was a big deal for them, actually, getting Prince Henry as a member. But yeah, I think as far as he talks about chairs a lot. I've never noticed this before. I've never seen any pageant poet talk about chairs quite as much as Webster does.
Maybe that's the one thing you always heard about pageants from the backstage people, is that there's a lot of standing. If you write one, Webster, could you put some chairs in? That would be good.
Well, you can ride on like a sea leopard or something, or you can just sit comfortably on a chair with some roses on it.
It does feel much more like a modern float, though, this one, doesn't it? It does feel like it's a very nice float going by, and everyone's waving, and one of them makes a very short speech.
So we get a parade of English kings stopping at Henry VII. And I suppose if we'd had Elizabeth represented, she she was responsible for the death of James's mother, so maybe that wouldn't have been politic. Or maybe James just wouldn't have appreciated the comparison. I mean, who knows? But it's it's strange who they include and who they exclude.
Other thoughts? It's quite a straightforward pageant, so we'll move on relatively quickly into some a reasonable amount of chunk. We're going to head pretty much to the end of the document reasonably quickly unless I notice something exciting that I want to pause on. Rachel.
No, by saying that they're free likewise of this company, are they saying that all these people listed within this paragraph were, that these, Queen Anne and the Duchesses and all these people, that they were also members of this company? Okay. Because
Yeah.
I was wondering, I was wondering.
But it would have been on honorary membership. They wouldn't have been expected to pay quarterage or anything like that. It would have been an honour, well, as far as the company is concerned, an honour for them to get membership.
And presumably also useful influence in a sort of patron type of way, yeah?
Well, I think what's happening in 1607, I don't go back to it because it's quite a very interesting event, but James told his ministers to write to the company to invite him. So he wasn't trying to freely invite him, they were told to invite him. And then he instructed them they had to give membership to all his favourite courtiers, whom are listed here.
Okay, we're going to go on. I'm going to read the next short paragraph. Then Liza, the fourth eminent pageant. Lynn, the paragraph after that. Greg, if you could follow Lynn. Lynsey, sorry, I shouldn't contract your name. I apologise. I'm very sorry about that. Rachel, if you could read learning coming up, and then we'll briefly pause, but Alex will have the massive chunk that follows that, but we'll briefly pause before we do the massive chunk. So I'm reading the next bit simply because it's a bit of repetition. Next I bring our 2 sea triumphs, and after that the ship called the Holy Lamb, which brings hanging in her shrouds the golden fleece. The conceit of this being that God is the guide and protector of all prosperous ventures. The second this, follow the 2 beasts, the lion and camel, proper to the arms of the company. On the camel rides a Turk, such as used to travail with caravans, and on the lion a Moor or wild Numidian. So before we go into actual the rest of it, it's just a return of a lion and a camel. We haven't had so much of this for a while, so it's nice to see those. Slightly problematic question about the Moor or wild Numidian there, but we have been here before. They've returned with the 2 sea triumphs from earlier, but we seem to also have a ship. So they've got a sort of standard ship available. They're not holding on to that ship called the Holy Lamb. Shrouds the golden fleece. We've had the golden fleece before as well, so I'm wondering whether there's some recycling possibly going there. We won't linger on any of those thoughts. Let's go to the fourth pageant. Liza, please.
The fourth eminent pageant I call the Monument of Charity and Learning. This fashioned like a beautiful garden with all kind of flowers. At the 4 corners, 4 artificial bird cages with variety of birds in them. This for the beauty of the flowers and melody of the birds, to represent a spring in winter. In the midst of the garden, under one elm tree, sits the famous and worthy patriot, Sir Thomas White, who had a dream that he should build a college where 2 bodies of an elm sprang from one root, and being inspired to it by God, first rode to Cambridge to see if he could find any such. Failing of it there, went to Oxford, and surveying all the grounds in and near the university, at last in Gloucester Hall garden he found one that somewhat resembled it, upon which he resolved to endow it with larger revenue, and to increase the foundation, having set men at work upon it, and riding one day out at the North Gate at Oxford, he spied on his right hand the self-same elm had been figured him in his dream. Whereupon he gives o'er his former purpose of so amply enlarging Gloucester Hall, yet not without a large exhibition to it, purchases the ground where the elm stood, and in the same place built the College of St. John Baptist. To this day the elm grows in the garden, carefully preserved, as being under God a motive to their worthy foundation.
This I have heard, fellows of the... Oh, sorry.
No. It is Lynsey next, then Greg.
Oh, sorry.
This I have heard, fellows of the House of Approved Credit and no way superstitiously given, affirm to have been delivered from man to man since the first building of it, and that Sir Thomas White, inviting the Abbot of Osney to dinner in the aforesaid hall, in the abbot's presence and the hearing of divers other grave persons, affirmed by God's inspiration in the former recited manner, he built and endowed the college.
This relation is somewhat with the largest, only to give you the better light to the figure. The chief person in this is Sir Thomas White, sitting in his eminent habit of Lord Mayor. On the one hand sits Charity with a pelican on her head, on the other Learning with a book in one hand and a laurel wreath in the other. Behind him is the College of St. John Baptist in Oxford, exactly modelled, two cornets which for more pleasure answer one and another interchangeably, and round about the pageant sit 12 of the 24 cities. 4 more would have overburthened it, the which this worthy gentleman had been a charitable benefactor. When my lord approaches to the front of this piece, Learning humbles herself to him in these ensuing verses.
And here we have the speech of Learning.
To express what happiness the country yields, the poets feigned heaven in the Elysian fields. We figure here a garden, fresh and new, in which the chiefest of our blessings grew. This worthy patriot here, Sir Thomas White, whilst he was living, had a dream one night. He had built a college and given living to it, where 2 elm bodies sprang up from en route. And as he dreamt, most certain 'tis he found the elm near Oxford, and upon that ground built St. John's College. Truth can testify his merit, whilst his faith and charity was the true compass, measured every part, and took the latitude of his Christian heart. Faith kept the centre, charity walked this round, until a true circumference was found, and made the impression of this figure strike each worthy senator to do the like.
And we'll just pause there before we go into the final stretch towards the end. So there's an awful lot of additional, very interesting material here. But actually, in terms of the practical what's happening, there is a pageant with a lovely garden, a tree, Sir Thomas White, charity and Learning gives a speech. I mean, in many ways, this is a very simple thing that we're seeing here. I'm sure it had many complicated things. We've got the roundabout the pageant sit 12 and 24, 4 and 20 cities. So 12 of the 4 and 20 cities. You're going to get 12 in. There are 4 and 20, but you can have 12 because otherwise it would just be too big. So someone's making some lovely cities here.
Yeah, and a model of St. John's College too. So they must have had someone quite skilled at building these model buildings.
It's just bringing me back to childhood of going around one of those little model villages now and just going, yes, I am a giant.
To me, it seems more like those models of, when you visit a cathedral, there's usually a little model cathedral with it, something like that, I guess.
Yeah, yes, absolutely, yes. Sorry, I was about to go into anecdote mode, which I will not do. I have an anecdote about a model of a cathedral. Another time, another place. But we go into lengthy digression about why Sir Thomas White is here and some backstory, which is all very interesting, but I don't see how any of that is going to be presented to the people. It's just more for this printed document, but it was really nice. I liked a lot of that. Any thoughts, Alex?
So earlier he mentions the roses, which I think are artificial roses. So with these flowers that he mentions as giving the impression of spring and winter, they would have been artificial flowers as well. They wouldn't have been forced flowers that have been kind of... I'm interested in I'm genuinely interested in the intersection of horticulture and kind of stage performance, if there is one. Because kind of gardens are like, you know, what I know of like sort of greenhouse gardens and things are in their very infancy, I think, in this period. But maybe they're just artificial flowers made of silks, I don't know.
They probably are, especially given it's late October. It would be quite difficult to keep anything particularly going.
It just reminded me of Chelsea Flowers Show, where everything has to be like, you know, 2 months ahead of where it would be normally, and this year it's going to be much later. That it creates havoc. But and I'm guessing are the birds fake birds, or are they real caged linnets and what?
Yeah, melody of the birds. Yeah, is that some clever device? We've had a giant cock before, so I see no particular reason.
Hey, speak for yourself.
Yeah, I say nothing.
In the pageants, we have had a large operated cock did all sorts of exciting things. Rachel, please stop me before I continue down this double entendre that is clearly a blind alley.
No, I was gonna say, are music boxes a thing now? Could they be real birds or little fake birds in some, you know, music box type thing?
I think on some form, yes. I don't know. I think we have had mechanical devices making that kind of music by now.
He does drop in some really interesting details, actually, Webster. I think it's because he's new to it, perhaps. You know, you get a bit more information about the minutiae of what's going on. Jazz, obviously.
Yes, obviously. Well, you know, they're important. You know, I'd insist on one. Alex, I'm going to tee you up now for the close. And Lynsey, if I could ask you to do the speech coming up after that. And Liza, if you could close with the final paragraph of prose after that. So let's find out. We're going into the sort of latter end of this event where we're getting details about what people are doing after they've gone to the Guildhall and are returning to Paul's later on in the evening, and also how they'll be perhaps going back to the Lord Mayor's house after they've been to Paul's. So the main style of the event we're now starting to step away from.
The last I call the monument of gratitude, which thus dilates itself. Upon an artificial rock set with mother of pearl and such other precious stones as are found in quarries, are placed 4 curious pyramids charged with the prince's arms, the 3 feathers, which by day yield a glorious show, and by night are more goodly, for they have lights in them, that at such time as my Lord Mayor returns from Paul's, shall make certain ovals and squares resemble precious stones. The rock expresses the riches of the kingdom Prince Henry was born heir to. The pyramids, which are monuments for the dead, that he is deceased. On the top of this rests half a celestial globe. In the midst of this hangs the Holy Lamb in the sunbeams. On either side of these, an angel. Upon a pedestal of gold stands the figure of Prince Henry with his coronet, George and garter. In his left hand, he holds a circlet or crimson velvet charged with 4 holy lambs, such as our company choose masters with. In several cants beneath sits first magistracy tending a beehive to express his gravity and youth, and forward industry to have proved an absolute governor. Next, liberality. By her, a dromedary showing his speed and alacrity in gratifying his followers. Navigation with the Jacob staff and compass, expressing that his desire that his reading that way might in time grow to the practice and building. To that purpose, one of the goodliest ships was ever launched in the river. In the next, unanimity with a chaplet of lilies. In her lap, a sheaf of arrows, showing he loved nobility and commonality with an entire heart. Next, Industry, on a hill where ants are hoarding up corn, expressing his forward inclination to all noble exercise. Next, chastity, by her a unicorn, showing it is guide to all other virtues and clears the fountainhead from all poison. Justice with her properties, then obedience, by her an elephant, the strongest beast, that most observant man of any creature. Then peace, sleeping upon a cannon, alluding to the eternal peace he now possesses. Fortitude, a pillar in one hand, a serpent wreathed about the other, to expect his height of mind, and the expectation of an undaunted resolution. These 12 thus seated, I figure loyalty as well-sworn servant to this city, as to this company, and at my Lord Mayor's coming from Paul's and going down Wood Street, Ahmad le Grand delivers this speech unto him.
Of all the triumphs which your eye has viewed, this the fair monument of gratitude. This chiefly should your eye and ear employ, that was of all your brotherhood the joy. Worthy Prince Henry, fame's best president, called to a higher court of parliament, in his full strength of youth and height of blood, and which crowned all when he was truly good. On virtue and on worth he still was throwing most bounteous showers, where'er he found them growing. He never did disguise his ways by art, but shooted his intents in unto his heart, and loved to do good more for goodness' sake than any retribution man could make. Such was this prince, such are the noble hearts, who, when they die, yet die not in all parts, but from the integrity of a brave mind, leave a most clear and eminent fame behind. Thus hath this jewel not quite lost his ray, only cased up gainst a more glorious day. And be it remembered that our company have not forgot him who ought ne'er to die. Yet wherefore should our sorrow give him dead, when a new phoenix springs up in his stead, that as he seconds him in every grace, may second him in brotherhood and place. God rest, my lord, integrity, that keeps the safest watch and breeds the soundest sleeps. Make the last day of this your holding seat joyful as this, or rather, more complete.
I could, a more curious and elaborate way, have expressed myself in these my endeavours, but to have been rather too tedious in my speeches or too weighty might have troubled my noble lord, and puzzled the understanding of the common people. Suffice it, I hope 'tis well. And if it please his lordships and my worthy employers, I am amply satisfied. Finis.
And indeed, that is the end there. And what an interesting last monument of gratitude we've got here, and speeches here as we go into the closing elements here, as this speech that was given coming from Paul's. So they've gone back to St. Paul's, and then he's heading home after a long day, gets this speech all about Prince Henry, that he is deceased. Yeah, this is a fascinating choice of subject for this particular pageant. What's going on here?
Well, that's definitely the kind of last paragraph you write at 3 a.m. when you finish the essay and you have the class at 7. It was like, I finished this. I hope you like it. I could have put more in there, but it would have been too much, okay? And yeah, I mean, I went into this wondering why Webster doesn't get hired back. And this pageant does feel substantially different from some of the others that we've read. It feels a little more scattershot. The symbolism is a little bit more obscure. Like, for example, the whole pageant with Sir Thomas White and founding St. John's College and the cities he was a patron of, really that whole area is about charity. But Monday would have made a long speech about charity and how building these beautiful edifices gets you closer to heaven, and it's all about charity. He'd have stayed on message. Whereas Webster, he was like, this guy, right? Okay, he saw this tree in a dream, and he's so yeah, it feels a little bit more scattershot. This pageant. I don't know what impression everyone else got.
That's really interesting. I think Webster, he kind of likes the set pieces in a way because they enable him to do this kind of imaginative work that you've just been describing there, Liza. But you're right. I think it's, in some respects, the actual function of this is less important to him. It's kind of secondary. But what he writes about Prince Henry comes across, I think, as quite genuinely heartfelt. I mean, he wrote one of the epitaphs for Henry when he died, some 10 years previously. Henry was a great Protestant hero as well. So he's kind of something like Webster would have really, if I was Prince Charles, I would have been mightily hacked off to have been given so much shade in this speech. You're second in birth, you're second in everything. You're just second.
Wait, Rachel had her hand up, didn't I? Right. I'm sorry, I stepped on you.
That's all right.
No, I was just gonna say maybe
everyone's frozen.
Am I frozen?
No, I think you were just having a lag moment there.
I was. Now I'm getting a little remonstrating message going like, your internet connection is unstable. Yes, I know it's unstable. I'm unstable.
Rachel.
And you've frozen again. Why?
Liza, we'll give your internet a moment. Rachel.
No, I was just gonna say maybe maybe it'll just be a mystery why he wasn't invited back, and maybe it was something more personal than maybe something more behind the scenes than just the pageant for why he wasn't invited back. But I think from reading this, it might just be his inexperience at writing this type of thing, because it does seem different. There's other pageants, the other pageants where they're throwing things to the audiences, or there were like these little plays going on to entertain audiences, where this one, there's so much talk of colleges and so much talk of, old patrons in the inner workings of this, of the merchant tailors in particular. And I wonder how interesting that would be to just your average Londoner to hear the history of this guild, and not the only thing that's kind of like play-like or fun is the Thestis or and Oceanus, that you have these like that, but the rest is does come off as like a college graduation speak, or just a regular formal speech that we've all probably sat through at one point.
Yeah, the speeches do not seem as important as the visual stuff. I mean, these are very pageant floaty and smiling and waving as you go by, a lot of these, until you get to the massive sepulchre for the final one here. So it's a really interesting one. Liza, if you're back with us, if you want to state your point.
I am back, yes. And yeah, I do. I think, yeah, probably my favorite bit of verse in this is the speech about Prince Henry. But there are other lines in here that do ping out at me, that could, like the metaphor of the flint, which I think is the end of Oceanus' speech at the beginning, honor and the flint, which strikes me as good enough to have been put in a play. I wonder if he did cannibalize this material for any of his plays, whether there are intertexts. That's a really fun little side alley for one's thoughts.
Sadly, we need to leave Webster behind, and the Lord Mayor show seems to have left Webster behind. Do we have any intimations as to why we do not see Webster again?
I've always just assumed that it didn't suit him as a medium, because it had to be done so quickly, and he had to think about, the purpose of what he was doing in a way that he wasn't necessarily habituated to. I haven't really got any evidence for that beyond, my sense of how he was as a writer. And I think this was his company, so I suspect there's probably some, behind the scenes discussion of him getting commission. He was accompanied by 3 painter stainers as artificers as well, so they're quite a big team for this one, which is probably reflected in the kind of very lovely detail of the pageantry as well.
Because if we include the water show, I count 7 plus riders and other bits and pieces. There's an awful lot visually going on here. But sadly, we have to jump into the next year, and we jump into a plague year. Tracey, what happened in 1625?
Lots and lots and lots of people died. I've just had some literally off breaking news. Aaron Columbus, who is a specialist in plague, tells me that in the suburban areas of London, places like Cripplegate, there was up to 48% mortality in 1625. It was more like 25% across the board, as a kind of general figure. So you're looking at a lot less in the kind of the wealthier intramural parishes. But that's nearly half the people dying. It was a catastrophic plague. And of course, by some strange coincidence, it was also the year of the accession of Charles, and his coronation, as his father's had to be postponed by a year, although it never actually been Charles.
I was wondering whether James died of plague.
I don't think he did. No.
Isn't it dysentery or something like that? He didn't. He doesn't he? He's or something along those. He was not a well man generally by that point.
He was getting on a bit. Remember, he'd been King of Scotland for quite some time before he turned up in London. But yeah, there was no royal pageantry. Although I do know that the livery companies were being chased for years and years and years later by the city corporation to pay their share for the royal entry 1625 that never was. And there's a really poor poem by my Uncle George Wither which talks about the kind of abandoned half constructed arches in the streets. But you get a sense of it from Middleton's show as well. Obviously, he kind of alludes to the terrible time it all had in the first pageant device.
Yes, and so we have to do a hop, skip, and a jump across 1625, and we jump into 1626, and we are back with Thomas Middleton, who we have been bosom friends with for many a pageant in the past, and now we are going to dive into. It's a much shorter text to get through. We will stop and start occasionally, but there's not that much to stop and start with. Liza, as is my wont, if you could read the opening bump, please, to tell us what is this pageant?
To the honour of him to whom the noble fraternity of drapers, his worthy brothers, have consecrated their loves in magnificent triumphs, the Right Honourable Cuthbert Hackney, Lord Mayor of the City of London. The city's choice, thy company's free love, this day's unlooked-for triumph, all 3, the happiness of thy life to be most great, prove, add to these justice, and thou art complete. At your lordship's command, Thomas Middleton.
So we are looking at triumphs of health and prosperity, which health perhaps being a rather important term following the previous year. So Cuthbert, Lord Mayor of London, what do we know about Cuthbert Hackett?
I think Rachel's just kind of jumps in with the comment about it in the chat. Those of you who've seen some of the previous stuff from the early 1620s will remember that the Drapers had a Lord Mayor foisted on them in 1621, a man called Edward Barkham, and they didn't really want him for all sorts of reasons. And they were slightly kind of under the cosh financially in this period as well. You would be surprised to hear Cuthbert Hackett was also translated into the Drapers' Company the year before this year's show. So he's another man who was not sort of homegrown, if you like. I don't get the sense there was much of a controversy about this one in comparison to 1621, but he was originally a dyer.
Okay, Rachel, if I could ask you to read the first paragraph coming up, Alex to read the next, Lynsey to read the speech in the hill where the rainbow appears, and then we'll briefly pause.
If you should search all chronicles, histories, records, in what language or letter soever, if the inquisitive man should waste the dear treasure of his time and eyesight, he shall conclude his life only with his certainty, that there is no subject upon earth received into the place of his government with the like state and magnificence, as is his majesty's great substitute into his honourable charge the city of London, bearing the inscription of the Chamber Royal, which that it may now appear to the world no less illustrated with brotherly affection than former triumphal times have been partakers of, this takes delight to present itself.
And first to enter the worthy love of his honourable society, for his lordship's return from Westminster, having received some service by water, by the triumphant chariot of honour, the first that attends his lordship's most wished arrival bears the title of the Beautiful Hill, or fragrant garden, with flowery banks, near to which lambs and sheep are a-grazing. This platform, so cast into a hill, is adorned and garnished with all variety of odoriferous flowers, on the top arch with an artificial and curious rainbow, which both shows the antiquity of colours, the diversity and nobleness, and how much the more glorious and highly to be esteemed, they being presented in that blessed covenant of mercy, the bow in the clouds. The work itself encompassed with all various fruits, and bears the name of the most pleasant garden of England, the noble city of London, the flowers intimating the sweet odours of their virtue and goodnesses, and the fruits of their works of justice and charity, which have been both honourable brothers and bounteous benefactors to this ancient fraternity, who are presented in a device following, under the types and figures of their virtues in their lifetime, which made them famous then and memorable forever. And since we are yet amongst the woolly creatures that graze on the beauty of this beautiful platform, come we to the modern use of this noble mystery of ancient drapery, and we shall find the whole livery of this renowned and famous city furnished by it. It clothes the honourable senators in the highest and chiefest wearing, all courts of justice, magistrates and judges of the land. But for the better expression of the purpose in hand, a speaker gives life to these following words.
And this is the speech in the hill where the rainbow appears.
A cloud of grief hath showered upon the face of this sad city, and usurped the place of joy and cheerfulness, wearing the form of a long black eclipse in a rough storm. With flowers of tears this garden was o'erflown, till mercy was like the blessed rainbow shone. Behold what figure now the city bears, like gems unvalued, her best joys she wears, glad as faithful handmaid to obey, and wait upon the honour of this day. Fixed in the king's great substitute, delight, triumph, and pomp had almost lost their right. The garden springs again. The violet beds, the lofty flowers bear up their fragrant heads. Fruit overlaid their trees, barns crack with store. And yet how much the heavens wept before, threatening a second morning. Who so dull but must acknowledge mercy was at full? In these two mighty blessings, what's required? That which in conscience ought to be desired. Care and uprightness in the magistrate's place, and in all men obedience, truth, and grace.
And there we'll briefly pause. So we have mention of two pageants here. We've got there's the Triumphant Chariot of Honour, which was did some service by the water, but we may hear more about that in a moment. And then we have the Beautiful Hill or Fragrant Garden, of which we have playful sheep and lambs gambling about in some fashion, but more importantly, odoriferous flowers. There's something about the senses coming out of this that I'm really liking. It's all about life and lovely things, and yeah, where the rainbow appears. I'm interested. Did we have in the prose description? Did we have a mention of the rainbow? Did I miss that?
Yeah, there's on the top arch with an artificial and curious rainbow, isn't there? In that.
Ah,
Yeah.
Lovely, excellent. I assumed it was. I just missed it.
It was my wonderful reading.
So,
Robert,
yeah.
lulled you into state of anesthesia.
I was making notes. I have to wear many hats during these things.
This is actually sort of on Paul's chain, because it's quite a steep ascent from Paul's Wharf up to the cathedral, and obviously the device is a hill, and the idea of the arch with the rainbow on it would have been much more effective if you're kind of going up onto it up a hill. It would have really been very striking, I think, and they're obviously on their way to St Paul's, so it would kind of make sense for it to be south of the cathedral at the top of the what's then called St Paul's Hill.
Well, so this is placed at the top as they're walking up to it, or is this moving with them, or what?
I think so. Then I think they move round to Paul's churchyard. I mean, that the sanctuary of prosperity. I just picking up some clues from what you get from the possible look of the devices.
Yes, because as I say, we have this brief mentioning that there was some water stuff earlier. We've returned from Westminster and we've got this happening somewhere on that approach up to Paul's. That first thing. Other thoughts? Lynsey.
Yes, this is very clear in the text. It's not a particularly outlandish observation, but just this idea that things have been a bit crap, to say the least. And now the rain has stopped, the rainbow is out, the sun is shining, the lambs are playing, the flowers are odoriferous, and it's all good again. I mean, there's something kind of quite topical about potentially, the way everybody's kind of now at this point, looking forward to maybe things being a bit better quite soon. It's quite interesting. That was all.
No, and I think that's absolutely right. I think that fits very nicely. Rachael.
What Lynsey just said, like about the rainbow and that it's coming out after the sun. Isn't it like in the Old Testament or something, or the Noah's Ark, that when the flood is over, the rainbow comes out? So maybe, I think Tracey was saying that part of their coat of arms has something to do with the clouds or something like that. So maybe, it doubles as both their part of their coat of arms and as this, the worst is over, here's the sign of mercy, the flood is over. It's very kind of sad, but touching because of the times that we're in.
Liza.
I like that too. My mind had run off hunting a rabbit, and I realized that the lambs must have been models because it's October. And it's almost impossible to get sheep to breed out of season.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Let's make our wonderful sheep and lambs. Alex.
Just following on from what Lynsey has said, really, it's kind of interesting comparing this one to the previous one in terms of, I've been party to some discussions now about what people want to see in theatre post-COVID. Do they want to see things that acknowledge the reality of what we've been through, or do they want kind of, Finian's Rainbow? And it's interesting kind of whether something like Webster's would have just been too arch and too clever at this point, that everyone would have been too exhausted to deal with something like that. And actually what you do want are gambling lambs and rainbows, because the symbolism is just much more obvious and much more clear and much easier to process. And I totally get it. I'm totally for Finian's Rainbow. It's interesting in that it's just so topical.
Yeah, it does very gracefully acknowledge past grief and saying, let's celebrate now.
Yes, because it's a double grief. You've not only, you've got plague and you've lost a king. There's a lot gone on. There's a lot gone on there. We need to move on ourselves to pick up on a few more details. Alex, if I could ask you to read the next bit of prose. Greg, Invisible, if you could do the speech in the sanctuary upon the fleece. Liza, the next big chunk of prose. Lynsey, if you could be the speech of government, and then we'll briefly pause before we go into the final moments. So yes, we have another element coming up next. We've had mention of one, detail of another. What's in through door number 3, please?
After this awaits his lordship's approach, a masterpiece of triumph called the Sanctuary of Prosperity, on the top arch of which hangs the Golden Fleece, which raises the worthy memory of that most famous and renowned brother of this company, Sir Francis Drake, who in 2 years and 10 months did encompass the whole world, deserving an eminent remembrance in this sanctuary, who never returned to his country without the Golden Fleece of honour and victory. The 4 fair Corinthian columns, or pillars, imply the 4 principal virtues: wisdom, justice, fortitude, temperance, the especial upholders of kingdoms, cities, and honourable societies.
The speech in the sanctuary upon the fleece. If Jason, with the noble hopes of Greece, who did from Colchis fetch the golden fleece, deserve a story of immortal fame, that both the Asians celebrate his name, what honour, celebration, and renown, in virtues right or justly to be shown, to the fair memory of Sir Francis Drake, England's true Jason, who did boldly make so many rare adventures, which were held for worth, and matched danger unparalleled, never returning to his country's eye without the golden fleece of victory. The world to see, and every magistrate takes a year's voyage when he takes this state, nor on these seas and there less dangers found than those of which the bold adventurers bound. For rocks, gulfs, quicksands, here is maddest spite, envy, detraction of all noble right. Vessels of honour those do threaten more than any ruin between sea and shore. Sail then by the compass of a virtuous name, and spite of spites thou bringst the fleece of fame.
Passing from this, and more to acknowledge the noble endeavours of the magistrate, his lordship and the worthy company is gracefully conducted toward the chariot of honour. On the most eminent seat thereof is government illustrated, it being the proper virtue by which we raise the noble memory of Sir Henry Fitz-Alwyn, who held the seat of magistracy in this city 24 years together, a most renowned brother of this company. In like manner, the worthy Sir John Norman first rode in barge to Westminster with silver oars under the person of munificence. Sir Simon Eyre, that built Leadenhall, a granary for the poor, under the type of piety, et sic ceteris. This chariot, drawn by 2 golden pelleted lions, being the proper supporters of the company's arms, those 2 that have their seats upon the lions presenting power and honour, the one in a little streamer of banneret bearing the arms of the present Lord Mayor, the other of the late, the truly generous and worthy, Sir Alan Cotton Knight, a bounteous and a noble housekeeper, one that hath spent the year of his magistracy to the great honour of the city, and by the sweetness of his disposition and the uprightness of his justice and government hath raised up a fair lasting memory to himself and his posterity for ever, at whose happy inauguration, though triumph was not then in season, death's pageants being only advanced upon the shoulders of men, his noble deservings were not thereby any way eclipsed. Est virtus sibi marmor et integritate triumphat.
With just propriety does this city stand, as fixed by fate in the middle of the land. It has, as in the body, the heart's place, fit for her works of piety and grace. The head her sovereign, under whom she sends all duties that just service comprehends. The eyes may be compared, at wisdom's rate, to the illustrious counsellors of state, set in that orb of royalty to give light to noble actions, stars of truth and right. The lips, the reverend clergy, judges, all that pronounce laws divine or temporal. The arms to the defensive part of men. So I descend under the heart again, the place where now you are, witness the love, true brotherhood's cost and triumph, all which move in this most grave solemnity, and in this the city's general love abstracted is. And as the heart in its meridian seat is stilled the fountain of the body's heat, the first thing receives life, the last that dies. These properties experience well applies to this most loyal city, that hath been in former ages as in these times seen, the fountain of affection, duty, zeal, and taught all cities through the common weal, the first that receives quickening life and spirit from the king's grace, which still she strives to inherit, and like the heart will be the last that dies in any duty toward good supplies. What can express affection's nobler fruit, both to the king and you, his substitute?
At the close of this speech, this chariot of honour and sanctuary of prosperity, with all her graceful concomitants, and the two other parts of triumph, take leave of his lordship for that time, and rest from service till the great feast at Guildhall be ended. So they all go off and have a bit of a meal. So I've counted 3 elements so far. Chariot of honour did some service at the water, has now returned, and we had some detail about that. The beautiful hill or fragrant garden, sanctuary of prosperity, and that seems to be it. We may have a bit more coming up in the remainder of this, but considering we had about 7 elements 2 years previously, I think it's fair to say that there's been some pulling back. The chariot of honour does seem to be that sort of layer cake a formation of having someone at the top and then various people lower down. So the structural part of that seems to be something we're used to. We've got the Golden Fleece. Always nice to have the Golden Fleece back in again. We've got some lions. I always like to have some lions. So yeah, it's thought there is something very touching about the way a lot of this is phrased, and it does seem to be quite comforting. I don't know if that's just the way you tell it, but it seems to be there. Liza?
I do like that they give credit and praise to the outgoing Lord Mayor who never had a triumph of his own. And I also do like the way they phrased it with what is it? Though triumph was not then in season, death's pageants being only advanced upon the shoulders of men. So it's again, because that text of course was not spoken on the day, but yeah, I like the parallel that it draws between the the pageants of joy and triumph and the image of maybe a funeral with coffins being carried or effigies of saints, perhaps. Something like that.
Well, I was just going to say, do we know anything about Sir Alan Cotton? I can just imagine for the pageants the puns that are available for Cotton, and anyone who's got a name that can be used in various different ways. We've had Webb used, and various things. So, do we know anything about Sir Alan Cotton? I didn't think to prep us as a question, actually, because of course it's the year that pageant forgot. What kind of pageant would he have got? Who would have written it for him? We would never know.
It probably would have been Middleton. I mean, obviously he's got quite a track record with the Drapers already, and he was a city chronologer at this point too. So I think he probably would have known Alan Cotton. The tribute he gives to him seems very genuine, actually. He barely mentions Hackett. He's really, it's a bit like with Barkham in 21. There's this sort of just that absence, I think, speaks volumes, we say.
Yeah, let's remember the other guy.
Yes. Bloke with the big chain thing on and a hat.
Yeah. Okay, we're going to close the remainder of this text. Hold on to any thoughts that you've had. I'll read the next bit of prose. Greg, if you could close with the last speech in a moment, and Liza, if you could do the very final paragraph at the end. So we've gone to the great feast at Guildhall, but once that feast at Guildhall will be ended, after which the whole fabric of the triumph attends upon his honour, both towards St. Paul's and homeward, his lordship accompanied with the grave and honourable senators of the city, amongst whom the two worthy sheriffs, his lordship's grave assistants for the year, the worshipful and generous Master Richard Fenn and Master Edward Brumfield, ought not to pass of my respect unremembered, whose bounty and nobleness for the year will no doubt give the best expression to their own worthiness. Between the cross and entrance of Wood Street, that part of triumph being planted, being the fragrant garden of England, with the rainbow to which the concluding speech hath chiefly reference, there takes its farewell of his lordship, accompanied with the fountain of virtue, being the fourth part of the triumph.
Mercy's fair object, the celestial bow, as in the morning it began to show, it closes up this great triumphal day, and by example shows the year, the way, which if power worthily and rightly spend, it must with mercy both begin and end. It is a year that crowns the life of man, bringing to peace with honour what can be more desired. 'Tis virtue's harvest time, when gravity and judgments in their prime, to speak more happily, 'tis a time given to treasure up good actions fit for heaven. To a brotherhood of honour thou art fixed, that has stood long fair in just virtue's eye. For within 12 years' space thou art the sixth that has been Lord Mayor of this company. This is no usual grace, being now the last. Close the word nobly up, that what is past and known to be good in the former 5 may in thy present care be kept alive. Then is thy brotherhood for their love and cost requited amply, but thy own soul most. Health and a happy peace fill all thy days. When thy year ends, may then begin thy praise.
For the fabric of structure of the whole triumph in so short a time so gracefully performed, the commendation of that, the industry of Master Garrett Christmas, may justly challenge, a man not only excellent in his art, but faithful in his undertakings. Finis.
Lovely, lovely credit, as per usual for Garrett Christmas, for his wonderful work in creating that. The Fountain of Virtue, did I miss that, or did the Fountain of Virtue just not get a mention until the end? Apparently, there's a fourth pageant that I missed. I only counted 3. Apparently, there's a Fountain of Virtue out there somewhere. So that's out there somewhere. It's interesting, yeah, when his lordship's grave assistants, Master Richard Fenn, Master Edward Brumfield, they get a bit of a honourable mention there. Again, not so much of a repeated mention of the actual Lord Mayor, but his assistants, they get a shout out. Yeah, so the return of the fragrant garden and the rainbow and the fountain of virtue for the end of the day on his way home. I've asked where Wood Street is before, haven't I? And I've once again forgotten where Wood Street is.
It's a junction towards the top end of Cheapside, and there would have been musicians playing on the leads of the church, St Peter Cheap, on the corner.
So where on the map again, just for the viewers at home?
So it's just between the Little Conduit and Cheapside Cross.
Excellent. Right. Okay, so we other thoughts about that sort of latter end or this particular pageant? They're quite contrasty, aren't they? This feels much smaller in scale. But it's got some lovely touches to it that are really nice in terms of the calamity that it follows after. Being really big and pompy would probably not be appropriate. I think that's a fair way. But other thoughts in the room? Rachel?
No, in the previous years, like, because the Drapers, if I'm remembering correctly, wasn't there one that was it Monday wrote for them and it was criticized as being, looking cheap or something like that. Was this guild or was that somebody else?
No, it was one of the ones that did for the Ironmongers Company.
Oh, never mind.
1618.
There was a Drapers one that we read that was sort of basic, or seemed sort of basic.
The one the one I'm thinking of, I think, is the one where there's the Robin Hood play at the end that I thought was that they were criticized for some part of it.
That's the one. It's called Cedar Oath Amboss, 1618.
Yeah, what I'm trying to say by bringing that one up is, them possibly wearing older costumes to show, how wool stands up to time and, how it's a good product in that way. And, maybe not coming off as, I think like if it was the Goldmongers this year, it would be a poor choice because it would be, they're just something grand and luxurious. But I think the Drapers, they're lower key, and that fits so well for this year.
Yeah,
I
just wanted to go back, talking about things being a bit basic. We've in the early sort of 1620s, we have been noticing that it's not been quite as elaborate as some of the ones we were looking at, sort of the early 1610s. That certainly Middleton is not cookie cutout, but there are certain similarities between Middleton's work. And then we have this Webster one, which seems to be visually pushing a little bit more. Whether that's true or not, I don't know. And then this may actually be more a return to what Middleton sort of been doing before. Actually, I'm now trying to think back what the early 1620s ones were like in that regard. Whether actually we're overstating how simple this is, and whether that's actually there's a bit more of a continuity Middleton wise.
I think it's a bit of both. I mean, they would have the members of the company who would have paid the show ultimately would have probably inevitably would have been a bit strapped for cash in 26. So I mean, he probably would have been given a strong steer to make it cheap, but without necessarily appearing to be cheap. But Middleton's very good at making the best of these kinds of situations. And also partly just a certain amount of ennui. Here we go, another Drapers show, as he says, 12th one in 6th one rather in 12 years. What can I say? How many more variants of sheep can I come up with, really?
How many more sheep?
It's like Ireland hosting Eurovision.
Yeah, yes, we must deliberately lose.
Absolutely. And merchant tailors are absolutely loaded as well. That does make a difference. And they really were one of the wealthiest companies. So,
Liza, yeah.
I have to say I do really enjoy Middleton's writing here. I think it's not, some of the past triumphs have felt a bit like empty praise singing, but Middleton here I feel is writing for what he thinks London needs to hear, and I think they need to hear. I think they need to hear stability, and I think they need to hear, we've had this bad time, but it's okay to feel happy again. So they need reassurance. And this pageant does seem to have more of a through line in those themes than the others.
Other thoughts? Rachel?
No, I was going to say, the lamb and the rainbow. There's also that, vaguely biblical imagery that it's, and a lamb is soft, and it's, people are supposed to be like lambs of God. So maybe there's something to do with that. And then also what Liza just said, this isn't praise singing, and it's what London people need to hear. It's a better campaign message for how this guy's going to run the government, to use it as a campaign message instead of singing his praises, because then it's like, what is the government all about him and not him for the people? Yeah, and also I just think Thomas Middleton is a great writer.
Yes, we also should note that this is our last Middleton Lord Mayor's show. We have an awful lot of other Middleton to do, and in terms of plays and other works, there is a lot of text to get through. It's going to take us a while. I'm going to say it's don't be afraid. We're not going to run out of Middleton anytime soon, but sadly time, because with these Lord's Mayor shows we're going a year at a time, 2 years at a time, 3 years at a time each session, people are passing on quite literally. So we've lost a king, and we are losing Middleton around about now. So that is a sort of sad way to close this session. So I'll go to final thoughts for something a bit more cheerful. Any final thoughts about the two pageants that we've had today, and how they've come across? Greg, do you, hopefully in visual as well as sound form, have any final thoughts?
I haven't enjoyed these as much as I have some of the others. I found them a bit, how do I put this, uninspiring and a little bit, just nothing really there for me. But still interesting, and I always enjoy a good Lord Mayor. So.
Alex, do you have any final thoughts? Stepping in, basically 40 odd years has passed since you last read one in real terms.
I do miss the German perspective. On the outsider perspective was really interesting on those ones we read, because there's such a. I think what I'm struck by them again is there's such a weird phenomenon. I'm sort of trying to think like what they would manifest as now. I know that we still have these Lord Mayor shows, but not sort of in the same way that, particularly that Webster one brings in all that mythological stuff and all that recent historical stuff. Like, I don't know, the opening ceremony of the Olympics or something, or I can only think of these sort of like religious pageants or what have you. I suppose there's still a thing in sort of the Map and Lucia novels, aren't they, that she puts on pageants, but I'm trying to think what a modern day equivalent of them would be. I love the comments about the Middleton one, and I think there is something very sensitive and very it's really interesting hearing, I think it was Liza said, giving London what it wants. And again, like a big conversation at the moment about theatres giving their communities, their local communities, what they want when we come back. But probably my heart would be with Webster's, because it's too clever for its own good. I really like that, and it's too ambitious for its own good. And nocturnal gems and all of this stuff is just it's just brilliant. But yeah, a really interesting contrast between them. And I'm like I've said before, my English history is so poor. I had no idea there was a plague year in between there. So it's really interesting seeing the contrast on either side. But yeah.
It'd be cool if you could join us next time, because we've got 2 Deckers back to back, these last 2.
Okay.
Very, very different approach. I won't say any more, but a lot less serious than Middleton.
Yes, we're letting Decker loose, both figuratively and literally.
Double deck.
Or someone lets him loose anyway. Just to think about the modern parallels. I mean, it's that sort of thing. I'm thinking of some of those sort of events where people create, giant sculptures that walk through city centres and things like that. We don't have exact parallels, but because the Lord Mayor show and such civic pageantry that we have now is much more fixed than this sort of creative burst.
Well, I think it's probably also good that we've gotten away from that whole empire history. Aren't we great? Let's have some Numidians riding lions and things. I think is a big plus. It's weird. The nearest thing I've experienced, which I think I said last time, was in Mesa in Arizona, the Mormon Jesus pageant, which was the most mind-blowing thing ever. The scale of it, that like literally a cast of hundreds and hundreds and live animals and all sorts of other things. Yeah, that's sort of the nearest cognate I can kind of find.
Lynsey, any final thoughts from you?
Yes, I've just sort of been mulling over this, what Rachael and others have been talking about these kind of biblical themes and images, and it's really reminding me of painterly representations of the second coming and the day of judgment and that kind of thing, and the lamb lies down with the lion, or other way around, whatever it is. I just think there's definitely that kind of vibe about it, and it's very appropriate given what everybody who was still alive had just survived. So it's quite a there's a sobriety and a consolation about the second one, as opposed to this sort of continuous pomp and triumph, which does get a bit boring after a while. It's just like, how many more globes with how many more seated dignitaries and how many, all of that.
How many more chairs?
Yeah, it just kind of, I don't know, it just sort of brought it back into scale somehow for me, the second one. That's really.
Yeah, lovely. Rachael, do you have any final thought?
No, I'm curious about Webster just because he only got one shot at it, and I wonder if it's one of, Tracey, you said it's because he writes slow, but also is it one of those things where, even when you have the job, you're afraid that you're going to lose it because it's your first one. So he tried to imitate other people, and we don't really get his voice. Or maybe if there was just a second one, it would be easier to clarify what his voice was and what his style would be when it was more experienced to this type of thing. And then just I also think that he's very poetic in his writing, but Thomas Middleton, I think he has more experience, and that leaves him with a sensitivity to the audience, as opposed to just trying to extract the most beautiful line out of the language, and instead just letting the words affect the audience by saying them at the right time. Like, he's got timing and sensitivity to the timing and the ear of his audience, which is extraordinary because it's so subtle.
Liza, final thoughts?
Well, just that we've got 2 very different pageants here, and they, they're each very glorious in their own way. I think, I do like the reaction from everyone that the second pageant is the one with heart, and the first pageant is the one that just takes place in the brain of a super nerd. And it's just like, okay, let's have a bunch of kings, and then let's have a bunch of, I don't know, generous people and some pirates, and yes, did you catch Sir Francis Drake appearing in both pageants? I wonder if they reused the costume.
We have that local Francis Drake impersonator who does all the Francis Drakes.
Yes. So, yeah, I mean, they're both kind of amazing of their kind, and they both give a bit of a window into those authors' other work. I wonder what your pageant viewer in the London street would have made of either of them, but especially of the Webster. I'm like, hey, what's he on about? Where's my boat with the golden fleece, or where's my dude riding a lion? I like the dude riding a lion.
Indeed. Tracey, do you have any final thoughts you wanted to add?
Just to say, it's again, it's always incredibly interesting to hear what people make of these shows, kind of thing I've poured over for all these years. And I think it's particularly the last couple of weeks, people have been really very sensitive themselves to the kind of the way that Middleton comes across, and sort of tailors his work to the moment. And, you get a sense of the kind of the complexity of the man and his thinking. I think it's really, really good to see that come across in this genre too.
Well, as I say, we are sadly out of time and out of Middleton. We will be returning for a couple more pageants in one session. It's going to be a double-decker, and that's going to be coming sometime next week, he said. Fingers crossed. If you're interested in getting involved, reading in any of our sessions, you can do it. There's a sign-up form. It's always on the website. Just go along and look for join in, and you can sign up for most weeks. We choose these. We choose what we're doing on the Saturday before the week itself. So yeah, come on down if you would like to know and experience some of the Lord's Mayor Show, time zone permitting. We don't know precisely when we're going to be doing it. We're probably try and set days, and then it goes horribly wrong last minute. I never try to say in advance what we're going to do precisely, because that would be dangerous. All that remains to thank all these wonderful readers. Thank you very much, everyone, and goodbye. Close up of a giant cat there.